everybody? Coach Cody here from the Athlete Academy in Salisbury, Maryland, bringing you another weekly Whiteboard Wisdom video. And today we're going to talk about how speed kills, but how change of direction is king. Now, coming from a track and field athlete, this was a mistake I made early on in my strength and conditioning career training athletes. This was a mistake I made in my own training, and fortunately, I've been able to grow over the past 8 years and learn from my mistakes. And now, with it being a mistake, that doesn't mean I was doing a disservice to my athletes, but what I noticed, I trained my athletes to be so fast, so explosive in a straight line that I never touched on the change in direction components of the game. And I think that's an issue a lot of young strength and conditioning coaches run into, a lot of sports coaches, and even some veterans. It's really easy to teach an athlete how to run really fast in a straight line, but teach an athlete how to change directions, that's probably the hardest part and probably the one thing that's really deficient in a lot of programs. So today I want to talk to you guys about our speed and agility program and all of the components that go into making it. You're going to find there's a lot of nuts and bolts to it. It's a very complex program, but at the same time, I'm going to make it nice and simple for a lot of you athletes, parents, and coaches. And I think a lot of you guys are really going to enjoy this one. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down below or contact me. Now, before we get started, I think it's important to start off what is not speed and agility. And these are the things that, again, I was guilty of early in my career. These are the things that I still see a lot of. I think a lot of sports coaches still do these. Unfortunately, there's some sports performance coaches that still do these probably. And now, it's not that these things are wrong. It's just that these things are not speed and agility. There's a way to utilize them, just like we always talk about. There's tools in the toolbox, and you got to know which tool you want to use best. Now, can I hit a nail in with a wrench? Probably. But a hammer is going to be most effective. So we got to figure out what's the hammers and what's the wrenches. And in speed and agility, these are wrenches, screwdrivers, and none of them are hammers. None of them are going to be the staple or the best thing for speed and agility. So let's kind of just run through these real quick. Number one, ladders. We all see them. Everybody says, hey, speed and agility program, let's work on speed and agility. Throw off some ladders, do some quick footwork. Parents are always like, hey, my athlete's feet need to get quicker. And I'm like, well, it's not that your athlete's feet need to get quicker. It's that your athlete needs to learn how to move better and how to move more efficiently. And even with that being said, how to produce more force and decrease ground contact time, which we're going to get into a little bit later. Number two, cone and box drills. And now don't get me wrong, we utilize these in our programs. But cones and box drills as a speed and agility component by itself, not effective. Now how we utilize them is actually in our integration component of our speed and agility, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But the integration component is where we take the movements that we're trying to teach the athlete and apply them at sub-maximal speed, which realistically is going to be game specific because most games are played at sub-maximal efforts as far as speed goes. Then you have banded sprints. Again, we utilize them. We utilize them in teaching athletes how to, it's a great way of putting them into an accelerative lean to teach them acceleration mechanics. It's also a great way to teach them how to run a little bit more aggressively. Some athletes tend to, just kind of like tiptoe across, and we want to teach them how to drive force down and through the ground. And then you got banded sport-specific movements, which we made a whole video on. Now, we don't utilize any of those because we have 0 athletes inside this facility who are ready for that level. That's going to be your professional level athletes who really need something like that. In our population, that's not going to be any of them right now because they're all young. Repeat sprints. Now, repeat sprints can be effective, but the important part of this, and I probably should have reworded it, is speed and agility drills without optimal rest aren't going to elicit physiological adaptations to allow the athletes to get more explosive. In order to get faster, you have to run at maximal effort. So, doing the 10 40-yard sprints with a 30-second rest, is not going to make you a more faster athlete. But those are the things that are not speed and agility. Again, it's not that we should never do them. It's more so that they are tools to the toolbox, and you got to know when to use them. So, actually, before we can get into here, let's go over here to our 3 phases of change of direction. So, like I said, speed kills, but change of direction is king. Our program, we focus on getting faster in a straight line. Yes, absolutely, we do that. But we spend the bulk of our time teaching change of direction, how to be more agile, because this is what's going to occur on the field 9 times out of 10. Very rarely do you see a breakaway linear sprint. There's going to be some kind of change of direction component. And the other side of it is if you look at athlete injuries from middle school to high school, nearly 90% of all injuries are going to occur off the ball when changing direction. And it's going to occur in these 2 phases here. And we're going to go over all 3 of these. So we really hammer down these two phases, which is why we have a less than 1% injury rate in all of our athletes, which is absolutely phenomenal considering we train a little north of 200 athletes in total for that year inside this facility, not even counting team training. So fantastic numbers, and I really feel that it's because of these two components here. So let's break down the 3 phases of change of direction, and what change of direction is, is sprinting in one direction, slowing down, decelerating, changing to sprint to another direction, and reaccelerating, right? So breaking it down in 3 phases. Number 1, the eccentric or braking phase. So this is me running in a straight line. I'm running, chasing somebody. They go to pass the ball to the opposite side. I have to slow my body down. This is a very important component in training that we can also kind of simulate in the weight room. And when we get into our strength training video, we'll talk about this a little bit further. But when we change direction, science shows that an athlete has to absorb 3 to 7 times their body weight when slowing down to change direction on the field. That's a lot of body weight. So if you're a 100-pound athlete, you're decelerating 300 to 700 pounds of force. If you're not in the weight room training, if you're not training at all to learn how to slow down your movement and to absorb your force, this is where you're going to get hurt. This is what we focus on here as far as our injury prevention. And then the second part of it is the transition phase. So again, we're running, we're slowing down, we're then stopping. There's a moment where we completely stop moving and then change directions to the other side, right? That's going to be the transition phase. Another component where you see a lot of athletes' injuries. The transition phase is going to be highly correlated with our body positioning, which is going to be correlated with our ability to apply force, which we'll get in a little bit. Step number 3 is going to be our concentric, our propulsive phase. This is us actually reaccelerating and sprinting to wherever the ball is going next. So again, 3 phases. Number 1, sprint, slow down, braking phase. That's going to be our eccentric muscle contractions. Number 2, the transition phase. That's actually the split second between stopping and changing direction to the other side, our isometric phase. Number 3, our propulsive, which is going to be our concentric. This is where a lot of sports coaches struggle. This is where a lot of sports coaches train in. A lot of sports coaches out there, they played a college sport, and they remember doing these drills. They remember how hard they were because this is maximal effort stuff right here. And they want their athletes to work and grind, so this is where we train a lot of. But the only issue is we're training to create a bigger engine, but we don't have any brakes. That's a really, really big issue. And you see that a lot in these drills here because this is the easy stuff. This is the not flashy stuff. This is the flashy stuff a lot of people see, the banded sprints, the chain sprints, whatever it may be. So we got to spend time into all 3 of these components, and for us, we actually spend more time here than we do there for that injury reduction purpose. So let's take a dive into our speed and agility program. Now, there are many, many, many ways to skin a cat. This is a component that I feel extremely confident in. I've always been a big advocate, and I've always been really interested, a big nerd in speed and agility, just to be frank. I always wanted to learn more about it, how to improve an athlete's speed, because speed feels awesome. Again, being a track athlete, running that 10.5 second 100 meter, there's nothing like feeling fast. It's one of the best feelings in the world, and I want all of my athletes to experience that. But with that being said, I had to shift my mindset from what I knew growing up to learn how to change directions and how to teach that. And this is where a lot of coaches struggle. So we're going to take a dive into what we're looking for inside of our training component. No matter which coach we have running our speed program, we have the same training focus, and we're all looking for the same things. So number 1, quality of movements. If we're not executing our change of direction movements with quality, we're not getting better on the field. There's not going to be a correlation from the drill to the field at all. So number 1, we have technical quality. That is how efficiently we're actually producing the movement, and how efficiently we shuffle, how efficiently we do a crossover shuffle, how the movement mechanics is of a linear sprint. There's certain components that go into that. So that's going to be the technical components, or what a lot of people consider as mechanics to sprinting. Number 2, you have efficiency. Now, efficiency is a little bit different. It could go along the lines of technical as well, but for us, efficiency is how much effort we're looking for in that drill. So we're taking a look at our 3-step approach, which we're going to get into in a little bit. We're teaching the movement. I don't want 100% effort. I don't want 100% speed in the teaching component. Slow it down to maybe 50% effort and learn how to do the movement. Once we integrate that movement, then we're going to conduct the movement at a sub-maximal effort. So maybe I'm looking for a 75-80% speed. And realistically, if you think of most sports, that's kind of where we're playing at, 75-80% with a short burst of 100%. And that 100% is going to be the apply. That's where we're going to apply it to a sports-specific movement or a game-like scenario, whatever that may be. So right back over here, that's efficiency. Simply put, how much effort we're putting in. And again, we want to adjust that effort based on what our focus is in that drill. Number 2, we must increase the athlete's ability to apply and generate force. So the way we're going to do that, number 1, is body positioning. We must have our bodies in the most optimal positions to produce force. If we're making a change of direction, if we're sprinting, we're cutting, that outside leg, the inside of the foot should be producing force through the ground, not the outside. If our outside of the ankle is producing force, that's where we're getting those ankle rolls. That's where we're going to fall over. We want the inside of our foot producing force. Now the inside leg, we want underneath the hip. That way we're leaning into the next direction we want to go into. If that outside leg is too far left and we're in that stable position, that's where athletes look quote unquote stuck on the field. They're not changing directions quickly or efficiently. And then the other side of it is taking the foot way too far towards the outside leg. That's where you're seeing the athletes fall. You see it all the time. Athletes get juked. And realistically, it comes down to poor body positioning, which is why they end up hitting the ground. And don't get me wrong, it's going to happen. You're never going to move 100% perfectly. But if we can teach athletes inside here how to move properly, the goal is their body is going to just start to do it subconsciously. When they're on the field, I don't want them thinking about foot position and changing directions. I want it to be practiced so much and rehearsed so much inside here that when they go out to that sporting field, they know how to move. And in fact, the number one thing we hear from new athletes and parents when they join this facility is literally after a month. They always say, my athlete's more confident. They're inside the play more. And I explain to them, it's not the fact that we made them mentally tougher. That's not the component that we went for. The truth of the matter is we taught the athletes how to move and how to position their bodies when changing directions, how to position themselves on the field to be in the play longer. Without proper body position, you can't play effective defense and you can't change direction well. Number 2, as far as our increased ability to apply force, is going to be increasing rate of force development. Rate of force development is how quickly you can produce force. There's 2 big components that go into it. Number 1 is your strength. The greater strength, the greater force you can produce. And number 2 is going to be ground contact time. How quickly you can produce the force and get off the ground and make that next move. And the issue that you see is a lot of athletes will train to be a power lifter, train very high 1-rep maxes, and they're training the strength component of it, so they have very high strength, but their ground contact time is so small that they're generating a lot of force, but they're on the ground for so long, it doesn't matter. They're already 1 or 2 steps behind. So our ability to get on the ground and off the ground super efficiently and quickly is going to determine us, how effectively we can get into that play defense, or how we're going to create separational offense to then score or whatever it may be. So that's going to be rate of force development. Reactive to external stimuli. So that's going to be our 3rd thing we're looking for in change of direction. And that's actually going to be our cognitive component of training, which is where we're then scanning and reacting to the field. So cognitively, when we're on the field, we're scanning where everybody is, we're watching where everybody's moving, and then we're reacting to them. And there's 3 ways we train that. Number 1 is going to be visual. So that can be as simple as, have an athlete run at me. I point over here to the right. They're going to change directions, break down, and sprint to that right side. So whichever way I point to, they sprint to. That's a visual cue. I'm visually pointing that way, and then they're sprinting that way. Number 2 is auditory. So if I have 2 cones set up, let's say a blue and a green cone, if they sprint at me and I say blue, they're going to break down, change direction, and go towards the blue cone. So that's going to be our auditory cue. That's me actually verbally telling you something you're going to change there. And number 3 is I like to call it game time. So game time is a one-on-one situation. You have an offensive person and a defensive person. Realistically, offensive person should always win because they know where they're going next. They have a predetermined pattern that they're looking to go into. The defensive person has to react to that. Defensive people have one of the toughest jobs on the field because they have to be able to react in a fraction of a second to remain inside the play and play defense on that player. And now, I think it's really important to note that while this is the most game time scenario, this is where we want to get better at, we just don't jump right into this because this is where athletes tend to get hurt. We want to take that slow roast crock pot approach. We have to teach the athletes how to move first. Once they learn the technical component of the movements, and actually let's swing over here to kind of go into our program. Once we teach the technical components, we can then integrate the components to that sub-max effort, kind of like I said earlier. Let's speed it up a little bit. That's where we kind of get into our visual and auditory things. And then number 3 is when we apply it, we put them in that game-like situation. We may do some small-sided games. We may do some one-on-one offensive, defensive drills. We may do some mirror drills, things like that. These are the cool things that everybody sees on Instagram. They see the mirror drills, athletes reacting, athletes moving fast. But what they're not seeing is everything that goes before that to teach the athlete how to move. And again, the reason why that's so important is because, again, almost 90% of all injuries in high school and middle school athletics, and I'd probably even say college, I'd have to look it up to be sure, it's going to occur off the ball when changing direction. So we spend more time in the teaching and integrating component up here in the eccentric isometric. We're ideally going to be able to decrease the injury rate in youth sports, which is a huge issue going on right now. So again, I know this was absolute a lot, and this was a longer video than normal, and it has a very specific niche. I think a lot of sports coaches are going to enjoy this, and I think a lot of parents will too. But the biggest thing is I want you guys to see that there's a lot that goes into a speed and agility program. It's not just looking at a drill online and say, hey, let's go do this drill just because I saw this professional athlete do it. You got to realize there's stepping stones to get there. There's a process to get there. They're professional athletes for a reason, and it's not because they were doing this high complex drill at the age of 13, 14, 15. It's because they were doing the right steps to get to where they are today. As always, if you have any questions, if you're a sports performance coach, if you do what we do, I'm here to make athletes across the shore better. So reach out to me. I'll gladly talk to you about your speed and agility program and see if we can help improve it as well. If you're a sports coach and you're looking to improve your team's speed and agility, definitely reach out to us. We'll be glad to work with you. Or if you're a parent and you just want your kid to get faster, let's sit down and take a look at them, go through an evaluation. We cover this a little bit more. We can put you into a program that's going to be guaranteed to produce your athlete's speed and agility on the field. As always, thank you guys and have a good one.